Welcome to a webinar on working with mothers, a child's most important support. This is part of the BC Society of Transition Houses webinar series for children who witness abuse counselors.
My name is Christy Delabure-O'Connor, and I'll be co-facilitating this webinar this morning. I'm an instructor in the Child and Youth Care program at Douglas College, and I've worked in a variety of child and youth care positions in crisis response and in the anti-violence world.
And I'm Elizabeth Barbeau. I'm also on faculty at Douglas College in the Department of Child and Youth Care Counseling. My background is in early childhood education, and I've also worked in the anti-violence field for a number of years. This webinar is on the topic of working with mothers. The main focus of children who witness abuse counselors is, of course, programming for the children they work with. For transition house workers, the focus is on the woman who is fleeing abuse. An important area of overlap for the two is the mothers who frequently need the support of anti-violence workers. Mothers who have experienced violence against women have unique needs as parents. In this seminar, we'll look at the nature of these needs and discuss some ways to support mothers in particular. We'll be focusing on the following topics. First, reasons for providing support to mothers as parents. Second, some of the ways that we can support mothers who have experienced violence against women. Third, practical suggestions for working with mothers. And finally, working with the child's other caregivers. Topic 1, reasons for providing support to mothers. From the point of view of children who witness abuse counselors, program goals in the short term relate to changes within the child. We aim to support children in developing self-esteem, awareness of safety issues, and an understanding of their own emotions and the dynamics of violence against women in relationships. But the long-term goals of our programs include keeping all family members safe and reducing family violence. These longer-term goals require that some kind of support be provided to the child's mother. In their 1999 publication, A Handbook for Health and Social Service Workers and Educators on Children Exposed to Women Abuse and Family Violence, Suderman and Jaffe argue that effective interventions for children cannot be separated from effective responses to women abuse itself. Safety for mothers means safety for children, they state. They also point to research and clinical findings that show a strong relationship between the mental wellness of the abused mother and the mental wellness of the child. In general, they note, the more depressed, anxious, isolated, and traumatized the abused woman is, the greater the level of her children's emotional and behavioral problems. This means that counseling and support for the mother who has experienced violence offers an indirect benefit to her children. The support we provide to children in children who witness abuse programs is short-term and professional. It's the child's mother who will provide the long-term, consistent environment in which children will achieve their real healing from the trauma. Assistance with practical issues such as housing, legal advocacy, income support, and job retraining will ensure better results for the whole family. Furthermore, children who witness abuse programs usually work with children after their stay in a transition house. In many cases, the mother of a child in the Children Who Witness Abuse program is not currently connected to any supportive services, and the families we support typically have multiple needs that range far beyond those that can be met within the Children Who Witness Abuse programs. One of the primary goals of supporting the mother is helping her learn to see things from her child's perspective. In the midst of her own trauma, a mother may be tempted to minimize the effects of the abuse on her child. She may require help understanding her child's reactions, including anger that may be directed at her as the safe parent. She may not understand why several months later the child is still acting out or displaying anger. And finally, parenting education and support groups support a mother's improved abilities to cope with the needs of her children. There are a number of specific issues that an abused mother may face as a parent. These are important for all anti-violence workers to recognize. Women fleeing violence typically share service needs such as developing a safety plan in regard to threats of ongoing violence, recovering from physical and emotional violence in the relationship, obtaining housing and financial support, overcoming disruptions in employment or education, securing competent advocacy related to criminal and family law proceedings, ostracism by her cultural community or extended family for, quotes, breaking up the family, a lack of privacy and anonymity if the mother lives in a small or rural community, where accessing services or leaving a violent partner may result in many people knowing about the situation. As parents, these needs are still present but are more complex. For example, securing legal advocacy may be complicated by custody and visitation issues. Pressure from her extended family may be greater if children are used as a tool to guilt her or shame her into returning to her abuser. In addition, a mother fleeing violence may need specific support related to parenting children who may present with significant trauma symptoms themselves, as well as ongoing emotional and behavioral problems. Or she may feel undermined as a parent by her abuser. Mothers who come to transition house programs may ask for support in some of the following areas: counseling for children, such as through Children Who Witness Abuse programs, information about healthy or normal child development, referrals and information about more intensive counseling for children who've been subject to abuse or trauma, referrals and information about general children's services, such as childcare or parenting relief or respite to give them a break, and general information on parenting. A mother might ask for assistance from transition house workers or from Children Who Witness Abuse counselors with issues such as physical safety or safety planning for herself or her children, information about community resources for her children, information on child development and how violence affects that development, respite from caretaking or a break from day-to-day struggles, help with parenting a child whose behavior is worrisome or challenging, help relating to her children in new and different ways, assistance negotiating contact with a partner over his access to the children, and legal advice about a custody order or about getting child support. As anti-violence workers, we are familiar with the ways in which the tactics of power and control affect a woman, often long after she has fled the day-to-day violence. The consequences of these tactics for women are well documented and understood and include erosion of self-esteem, living in chronic fear, health challenges, and a lack of self-determination. As a mother, these tactics can have particular effects. For example, the woman may believe she's an inadequate parent. Often the woman is portrayed by her abuser as an unfit mother and the cause of her children's deficits. She may fear that her children will be removed by child welfare. She may find herself frustrated in her attempts to create structure or be consistent with her children. Due to the abuse, her children may be experiencing challenges at school or in the community, and she may see this as evidence that she's a bad parent. As well, the woman may lose the respect of some or all of her children. Some of her children may see her as the legitimate target of abuse. They may disregard her parental authority or refuse to follow her rules. Her children may grow to devalue or be ashamed of their mother, following the attitude of the abuser. The woman may come to believe the twisted excuses the abuser provides for his behavior. She may believe that the abuse was her fault and try to modify her behavior. She may believe the abuse is culturally or religiously appropriate, or she may believe that men and boys should have more privileges and power in her family. She may feel guilty about the effects of the abuse on her children. The woman may change her parenting style in response to the abuser's parenting style. She may become too permissive in response to the authoritarian parenting of the abuser. On the other hand, she may become too authoritarian herself to try and keep the children from annoying the abuser. She may make age-inappropriate or unreasonable demands on her children to placate the abuser. She may be afraid to use discipline because the children have been through so much. She may feel that she's been left to do all the demanding parts of parenting, while the abuser has been able to engage in all the fun parts. The woman's capacity to manage may be thwarted or overwhelmed. She may experience depression, anxiety, poor sleeping, and other health concerns. Her capacity to care for her children and provide for their daily needs may have been compromised. If she has been denied the use of birth control, she may have more children than she desired and have trouble managing them. She may have been denied sufficient money to meet her children's basic needs for food, clothing, and other necessities. She may have developed a reactive rather than proactive parenting style, responding to crises rather than preventing problems. The woman may be using survival strategies with negative effects. For example, she may use alcohol or drugs in unhealthy ways. She may behave harshly towards her children, either verbally or physically. She may leave her children with inadequate caregivers in order to take a break herself. She may avoid being home, for example, by working double shifts. The woman's healthy relationship with her children may also be compromised. She may have been prevented from comforting or attending to her child by the abuser. The children may be angry with her for failing to protect them or for failing to evict the abuser. One child may have assumed a caregiving role towards the mother. Children who fear their mother's deportation or leaving may be anxious or may emotionally disengage in order to protect themselves from impending loss. And finally, the woman may have become trapped in competition for her children's loyalties. The abuser may have attempted to shape the child's view to see the abuser as good and the mother as bad. The abuser may have set himself up as the fun parent who has no rules. After separation, the abuser may entice the children to support his bid for custody with promises of a great life at his house. The abuser may well have more money and may be able to therefore offer more material goods and a nicer home to the children. At this point, we invite you to pause the webinar and spend a few moments considering your practice and your response to the questions on the following slide. Make some notes for yourself and consider sharing your ideas with your team at your next team meeting. Here are the reflection questions. Think about the example of one particular family you've worked with recently and consider the effects of power and control tactics on this family. Think about power and control tactics and the effects that they have had on this family. What is one specific strategy that you can use in your work to combat these effects? When you're ready to come back to the webinar, feel free to join us on the next slide.
Topic 2, how can we support mothers? Mothers who have been abused often face special and severe challenges after they leave an abusive relationship. at a time when their own emotional and practical resources are stretched to the limit, and they may be facing serious harassment and/or continued violence, their children are also severely distressed and challenged. The turmoil and stress can be overwhelming. To address some of these issues, some organizations offer special parenting support groups for mothers. These groups include topics such as understanding and defining abuse, noting the effects on children's self-care and self-esteem, reestablishing effective communication with children, and promoting nonviolent family relationships. Mutual support around custody and access issues and navigating the legal and community service systems may also be included. Making these groups very supportive and nurturing and empowering for the women in the group is a good way to enable mothers to support and nurture their children. Suderman and Jaffe point to some important components of a program to support mothers. Number one is advocacy. Women who have survived abuse can have multiple and often interrelated needs. For example, they may need support to access housing, income assistance, and referral to other supports for counseling. Women often experience stressors above and beyond the abuse, such as poverty. Anti-violence workers can support women in accessing the community services they need. Number two, healing the bond between mother and child. Children's emotions may include anger at their mother, a sense of betrayal, fear of abandonment, grief, and confusion. Children need to know their mother loves them, does not blame them for anything that happened, and will keep them safe. Anti-violence workers can provide children a psychologically safe space to begin to acknowledge and process their feelings of grief, loss, and pain. Anti-violence workers can create opportunities for children to safely reconnect with a parent around what has often been a shared experience of trauma between a mother and child. And thirdly, anti-violence workers can facilitate a positive shared experience between the child and the mother, opening the way for them to communicate about past issues. Number three, programs can provide help with concerning behaviors. Helping a mother address a child's concerning behaviors removes a major stressor from a mother's life. Anti-violence workers can share their knowledge about child development and how to respond to the child's behavior. And lastly, number four, understanding how their children are affected. Mothers are highly motivated to help their children and want to know how they can support the development of healthy coping skills. Mothers can help children heal from the effects of violence at home, and they can be supported to see how each of their children has been affected in a unique way. Anti-violence workers can provide supportive and educational groups and workshops that address topics such as how an abusive partner can affect her as a mother, how abusive men parent, how a child may be thinking and feeling about what happened, normal feelings a mother may have about her children, everyday essentials of parenting for when children have lived with violence, basics of good or positive discipline, and guidelines for setting family rules that are respectful of everyone. We must remain mindful of meeting the mother at her current cognitive and emotional level and in culturally appropriate ways. Often, information must be shared and modified several times to support a mother's full understanding, particularly when she too is recovering from the trauma of the abuse. Anti-violence workers must be sure not to put undue expectations on the mother that she may not be ready for. Our goal is to support the mother from a strength-based perspective. By building on her abilities and reminding her of her strengths while offering concrete educational information, we can support her both in her healing as an abused woman and in her role as the mother of a traumatized child. A mother's capacity to parent her children is compromised by the effects of the violence she experiences by her abuser. As the mother's mental, physical, and emotional health improves, so too can her parenting and her relationships with her children. Some programs run support groups specifically for the mothers of children in their Children Who Witness Abuse program. For example, some programs run groups for several weeks or one-time workshops aimed at helping mothers parent after abuse. Topics include how mothers can promote their child's healing, helping mothers deal with their own feelings around their child's exposure to violence, and how to establish boundaries and positive discipline within the family. In groups and also in one-to-one counseling, Children Who Witness Abuse counselors can affirm the mother as a parent and help her discover and nurture her strengths and resiliency. Maintaining a psychoeducational approach is important. Some ways to ensure this include focusing on parenting concerns rather than on a mother's personal issues, staying grounded in the present rather than past issues, avoiding the probing questions that might lead to deeper therapeutic work, which is inappropriate in this context and outside the boundaries of the Children Who Witness Abuse program's contract. Using instructional materials such as films, exercises, or handouts, and ensuring that those women who need and desire therapy are referred to an appropriate resource, such as a Stopping the Violence program. Some other specific ways that we can provide support to an abused mother include assistance and advocacy around safety and legal proceedings, assistance with practical matters such as housing, parental relief and support to ensure children maintain community ties, school, and activities while the mother is allowed the time and space for physical and emotional healing. Parenting support groups to improve coping with the special demands of children after leaving a violent relationship. We invite you again to pause the webinar at this point as you consider the questions on the following slide based on the information we have covered so far. As you did last time, think about particular children and mothers that you have worked with in your program to help you think of specific examples. Make notes for yourself that will help you engage in conversations with your coworkers about your ideas. So here are the reflection questions for this section of the webinar. Think about the ways that you already provide support to mothers you work with. What service areas would you say are particular strengths in your program? What are one or two areas where you could improve your service provision? And lastly, who in your organization can support you in improving service to mothers? When you have finished considering these questions, we invite you to join us again for topic 3 on the following slide.
Topic 3, practical suggestions for working with mothers. In this topic, we provide some concrete ideas that you can use to support mothers in your work. First, we offer 10 tips for parenting that are good for all of us to remember and may be particularly useful for the mothers that you work with. Later in this topic, we'll talk about the importance of positive messages, both messages that you can send to mothers and messages that mothers can send to their children. You may want to consider turning some of this information into a poster or a handout that you could provide to mothers with whom you work. 10 tips for parenting. Number 1, be a good role model. Children do as you do. You can model respect and also self-respect. You can model politeness, honesty, good choices, compassion, healthy expression of emotion, non-sexist points of view, or any other behavior or attitude that you want your children to adopt. Number 2, be clear on what you want them to do. Life with children can be an endless string of no and don't and stop that. It's important to teach children what not to do, but also show them which behaviors are valued. Instead of saying, don't hit the kitty, try saying, pat the kitty nicely. Instead of saying, stop that whining, try saying, use your words to tell me what you want. Instead of saying, be home by 10 or else, try saying, when you get home at 10, we can watch some TV together. In other words, when you ask for one behavior to stop, try to identify which behavior should replace it. Number 3, praise good behavior. Misbehavior sometimes gets more of our attention than positive behavior. Praising good behavior encourages more good behavior. For example, good job putting your toys away. I really like how you shared with your sister. Thanks for giving me a call to say you're going to Tina's house after school. Now I won't worry. Parenting experts tell us to use 5 praise statements for every one time you correct misbehavior. Number 4, focus on behavior. You love your children, but you don't always love their behavior. When you praise them or correct misbehavior, you're focusing on the behavior rather than the qualities of the child. For example, instead of saying, you're such a messy boy, you could say, I don't like the mess in this room. Instead of saying, you're so beautiful, you could say, wow, you really know how to pick out clothes that suit you. When there has been violence in the family, don't assume that boys will grow up to be abusers and girls will grow up to be victims. You may catch yourself saying things like, you're just like your father, or that's totally something your father would do. Stop yourself. Your children will grow up to be their own people, especially as you support them in doing so. Number 5, give the reason behind your request. Instead of saying, turn that TV down, try, kids, I have a headache. If the TV is not so loud, I can take a nap in the other room. Instead of saying, get down from there, you could say, I need you to stop climbing on that bookcase because it could fall over on you. Knowing the reason may make a child comply more quickly, or it may not. But over time, they will learn that their behavior has effects and that your rules are not arbitrary. They also get practice seeing another person's point of view. Number 6, keep the emotion out of discipline. All mothers get tired, frustrated, and irritable, and it's uncanny how often that can coincide with a child's misbehavior. Before you react, count to 3, take a deep breath, and think out your next words. Discipline should be a strategy to teach children, not an emotional reaction. And try not to yell. You need a tone of voice that's reserved for emergency situations. Children who live with arguing and yelling quickly learn to tune it out. If you make most of your requests in a normal tone of voice, you can let the words, not the volume, get your point across. Then, when there's a situation that needs an immediate response, children are more likely to take notice. Number 7, give children choices within what's reasonable. For example, instead of saying, do you want to go to bed now? Try, time for bed. Should we read this book or that book? Making choices is an important part of a child's developing independence. On the other hand, the child feels secure when she knows that her parent is in charge. Allowing the child to choose between bedtime books or which pajamas to wear allows her some freedom, but also clarifies that bedtime is a predictable part of the day, and as the mother, you will gently enforce it. Number 8, expect what's reasonable. Taking a young child shopping when he's hungry or tired is a recipe for a meltdown. There may be times when you have to do it, but expect that he might not make it through the experience smiling happily. Expecting a teenager to obey a 7 p.m. curfew may not be realistic either. Set your expectations at a level that's consistent with the child's age. Number 9, keep adult matters among adults. Children too young to understand adult issues can be upset to hear about them. Keep a clear line between what you tell children and what you might tell a family member or a friend. Likewise, it's not fair to expect a child to be the person in whom you confide your problems. Your children need you to be their parent first and their friend second. Finally, number 10, make sure you spend some fun time with your child. Playing with your child, talking, reading, or just hanging out gives you both a break from challenges going on in the rest of your life. Delighting in our children is a precious gift, and it's easy when we are overwhelmed and stressed out to forget how healing this gift can be for both of you. If you have more than one child, try to spend time with each one of them alone, as well as all of them together. When working with women who lack confidence as mothers, it's important to find occasions to communicate positive messages. Here are some examples of supportive words that you can offer to mothers about being a mother. You can say, there are no perfect mothers. We all have strengths and weaknesses as parents. You can remind her that mothers can change the lives of their children for the better. You can let her know that single parents are good parents too, and that mothers are good role models for boys. And you can remind her that learning to be a parent is a lifelong process. You can tell her that stopping exposure to violence was the best thing she could do for her children. Remind her that there are people here, if she needs them, who can help her. Remind her that she can make up for lost time, starting today. And remind her that she can model and teach nonviolent problem-solving attitudes and behavior to her children. Here are some positive messages that you can tell women about their children. You can remind them that most psychological problems in childhood diminish once the violence stops. Let them know that most children who've lived with violence in the past do just fine as adults. Let them know that children are resilient and will thrive in the right environment. And let them know that not all children need professional treatment to overcome the effects of violence. There is a lot that a mother can do to help her children. Finally, here are some messages that a mother can give to her child. She can let her child know that it is not a child's responsibility to keep their mother safe. She can say to her child, I will do everything in my power to keep you safe. And she can remind her children that when adults fight, this is an adult problem, and adults need to fix it. At this point, we invite you once again to pause the webinar after you've had a look at the reflection questions on the next page. And as you've done in the past, try thinking about particular children and mothers that you've worked with in your program to help you think of specific examples to answer the questions. Make some notes for yourself that will help you engage in conversations with your coworkers about your ideas. Here are the reflection questions. Think back over the positive messages suggested on the past couple of slides. What are some ways that you currently include positive messages in your work with women in general and with mothers in particular? Think about one or two women that you're currently working with and make a short list of positive messages that you think these women would benefit from hearing. When you're ready to rejoin the webinar, turn it back on again and we'll see you on the next slide.
Topic 4, working with the child's other caregivers. There will be times when you will confront issues related to a child's father or stepfather, a mother's boyfriend or girlfriend, foster parents, extended family members, and others who will be playing a caregiving role in the child's life. Normally, we do not work with the abuser, but there may be times when you will have contact with him. We are going to take a little time now to discuss how to work with these other caregivers. Working with the offending parent. When the Children Who Witness Abuse programs were first initiated in British Columbia in the early 1990s, it was acknowledged that this is not a crisis program, but one designed to support children after they have stopped living in an abusive situation. Program developers feared that many of the strategies taught to children to support their developing sense of safety and strength could actually put them at increased risk if used in a home where violence is still present. Most Children Who Witness Abuse programs adopted a principle of not working with a child who is living with or has extended visitation with the abuser. Over the years, some Children Who Witness Abuse counselors have had to make difficult decisions regarding this principle. What should be done if a child begins in the program and then the abuser returns to the family home? Where should the line be drawn between occasional and extended visitation with the abusive parent? Can we serve a child whose father lives in the family home and has taken responsibility for and ended his abuse? Can we serve children who are in the custody of their fathers? The answer varies depending on different program models. Some models of Children Who Witness Abuse programs encourage the participation of the father as long as he is no longer using violence against the mother or the child. If the safety of the mother and child are assured, and if the child will have ongoing contact with him, some argue that the father's participation is important. It may be helpful for the father to learn how to respond to his children's ambivalent feelings toward him and how to engage in the nonviolent management of children's behavior. Some studies also show that the participation of the father increases the likelihood that a child will successfully complete a Children Who Witness Abuse group. Each Children Who Witness Abuse program must consider this issue and create policy that clarifies whether formerly abusive parents should ever be involved. An important consideration will be whether the father has accepted responsibility for past violence and understands the impact that the abuse has had on the child. If they are involved, the policy should provide direction on screening fathers for appropriateness and describe the ways in which they can participate in the program. In some cases, it may be useful to provide the father with educational materials on violence against women and children exposed to violence. In other situations, you may provide a separate group for formerly abusive fathers. Taking the time to create policy ahead of time that anticipates different possibilities will help guide you in making individual decisions about inclusion or exclusion. If you are not sure whether to work with a particular father, you should seek consultation from a peer or a supervisor. In developing your policy, consider the following. Are the mother and child currently safe from violence? Has the father taken responsibility for the violence? Do both the mother and the child want the father to be involved? Might the father be using his participation as a means to increase his control over the mother and the child? Might the father be using his participation to gain leverage in custody and access? Or lastly, might the father use the program material to harass the mother? There are a variety of programs currently available to support a formerly abusive parent in learning healthier ways to act within a family. The goals of these programs include helping men who have used violence understand the impact of family violence, helping them unlearn social messages that condone and support violence against women and children, and teaching men positive skills for managing their anger, interacting with their spouse, and parenting their children. Sometimes the caregiver who refers the child to a Children Who Witness Abuse program isn't the mother. The child may not be in the care of the mother. He may be living temporarily or permanently with foster parents, grandparents, or other members of the extended family. Here are some concrete suggestions for involving the child's caregiver. Number 1 is a caregiver interview. Either in an individual or a group session, meet with the referring caregiver and explain the goals and structure of the Children Who Witness Abuse program. Encourage questions and expressions of concern. Caregivers may require additional support in understanding the needs of the mother and children. Education about the complexities of violence against women and the impact of exposure to violence can help caregivers understand the larger context. Caregivers may need encouragement not to give up when complex issues make it difficult for the mother to plan in the longer term. Clarify that caregivers are welcome to call you should any issues arise and that you will do the same. Secondly, you can use caregiver letters. Consider sending standard letters home each week to briefly explain what was done in the group with the children and to suggest how the caregiver may reinforce what was learned at home. Thirdly, you can follow up. Scheduling a follow-up with the caregiver after the group ends to discuss the child's participation in the program can be a helpful strategy. Encourage questions. Discuss the strengths you have observed in the child and discuss any concerns and suggestions that you may have. We invite you again to pause the webinar at this point as you consider the questions on the following slide. As you did last time, think about particular children and mothers you have worked with in your program to help you think about specific examples. Make notes for yourself that will help you engage in conversations with your coworkers about your ideas. So here are the questions for reflection on this topic 4. Have you had the opportunity to work with caregivers who are not the child's mother? If so, what specific strategies did you find helpful in supporting them to support the child in their care? Number 2, do you know what your agency's policy is regarding working with the offending parent? How well does that policy support you in your work? Have there been instances where you felt the policy needed to be updated or revised? Third, what resources are available in your community to support formerly abusive fathers? Once you've had time to consider these questions, we welcome you to join us on the next slide as we summarize the webinar topics.
We've come to the end of this webinar. In this webinar, we've discussed working with mothers who've been abused and supporting them to become the best parents they can be. We've talked about the unique needs of abused mothers and specific ways that we can support them. We have offered some practical suggestions for working with abused mothers. And we've discussed how to work with offending parents and a child's other caregivers. On the following slide is a list of resources that we consulted in preparing this webinar. You're welcome to pause the webinar here if you want to write down any of these references. Thank you so much for joining us in this webinar.
Thank you very much.